in the center. Very loud. I'm going to let you know. All right. Henry, Anthony. Hey folks, Roland Martin here. We are here in Houston. This is Juneteenth weekend. I want to thank all the folks who are watching on the Black Star Network. We are about to get started. Of course, I'm a native Houstonian. We've always celebrated Juneteenth. This is the second year it's been a federal holiday. The Juneteenth events happen because on economics. And so we got some great folks lined up. Entrepreneurs. We got some elected officials as well talking about what's happening on the city, county, state, and federal level to drive opportunities for African Americans. Commissioner Ellis, I just saw him. Where is he? He was over here. All right. So now see, Commissioner Ellis is smart. He doesn't come when the other politicians come. He comes early so he can actually. So Commissioner, go ahead and just take a seat right here because the whole point of this is to talk about what was happening with African Americans economically. And there are a lot of people who out here who talk about reparations. What I keep reminding them that there are literally billions and billions and billions of dollars that are being spent right now that we are not accessing. Federal government spends $560 billion a year on contracts. Black folks give 1.67%. And so you're one of the commissioners in Harris County. What is happening with the county to ensure that black folks are participating economically in the billions being spent?
Roland, happy Juneteenth. It's good to see you back home. And Juneteenth is an appropriate time to talk about economic opportunities for black people because some of us still haven't gotten the word that we're free. I see Sonny Messiah out there with the Houston Defender and her husband, Jody Giles. You know, in a lot of ways we attribute Maynard Jackson in particular with being the father of minority business enterprise programs on the local level. Perrin Mitchell, obviously on the federal level with all that he did, former congressman out of Baltimore. In terms of Harris County and Houston, a lot is going on, but not nearly enough. We did get the word a little late. City of Houston established a program for minority and women-owned businesses in 1984. I'm proud to say that under the current mayor, Sylvester, the numbers for the city of Houston really are off the charts, higher than Rory, and I want to give him praise for that. It takes a lot of effort to do that. In order to have a program focused on minority women-owned businesses, you have to go through some hoops. We're in America now. Steady. We give people this background. It came out of Richmond. So Maynard Jackson stopped the airport from being built in Atlanta, Georgia. He was elected mayor, but didn't have control of the council, and so he could not set up a program that was enforceable. So he essentially just stopped the trucks, the bulldozers.
He actually said tumbleweeds will roll down these runways before I allow it to be built without black participation.
A bold black man. I enjoy pointing out that's why when he left office as mayor of Atlanta, he had to get a job as a bond lawyer with a firm out of Chicago.
They wouldn't hire him.
Chapman and Cutler, I think.
So when before he became mayor, blacks in Atlanta were getting .0012.
It's the grandfather of it. The reason why the most successful black businesses in America tend to be in Atlanta is because of Maynard Jackson. Other cities, Detroit, because of Coleman Young and because of automotive industry. New York, because New York is just New York, the financial capital. But cities where we had the political clout first is where businesses went. Along comes Richmond, Virginia. Famous case. Croson case goes to the Supreme Court. Peanuts. Might have been for a couple $100,000. Toilet fixtures inside City Hall. In this case, challenging affirmative action programs in the business arena was working its way up. Mayor Maynard Jackson had a nephew, I think his name was Richardson, who was on city council. I remember my mentor, Mickey Leland, had me in Richmond or something. I met with the councilman and said, look, why don't y'all settle this thing? It's like that Bakke case. Remember that one?
Yep,
When
out
I
of
was,
California.
Yeah, when I was in law school in Texas, we tell people in California, why don't y'all settle it? Don't mess this thing up for the rest of the country. Of course, if you were in California, you didn't feel that way. So in Richmond, they took it to the Supreme Court. They ruled that before you can have a program focused on minority women-owned businesses, you have to do this thing called a disparity study. So you got to spend a bunch of money like reconstructing your tax returns. And then if you see there's a disparity, then you have to have a, quote, narrowly tailored remedy. Now, I'm telling this for a reason. That Croson case came down in, I don't know, maybe sometime in the late 80s. So city of Houston, most cities, Atlanta, set up programs. You didn't have to do this study. Then along comes this Croson case. So in Texas, of all places, Ann Richards was governor. They had 2 blacks in the Senate, Ada British Johnson out of Dallas, me out of Houston. We slipped some language in to do a disparity study in Texas, $1 million. I'll never forget Governor Ann Richards called me and said, Rodney, Senator, do you think we need to spend $1 million to figure out if your people, Hispanics and women, been discriminating? Don't you think, Senator, we can figure that out before spending $1 million? I said, yes, ma'am, but the United States Supreme Court requires it. So Texas did a disparity study. We continue to do it. The numbers are not what they ought to be, but it's the first major state in the country to do a disparity study. City of Houston kept its program in place. They pretty much used what was in the state's disparity study. Harris County didn't. When I became a county commissioner, I pushed for it. Sonny Messiah here in the audience helped a lot, raised a lot of hell to force our county to do it. The numbers came back. The black numbers, Hispanic numbers, South Asian, white numbers maybe came to about 6-7% just off the top of my head.
In one of the most diverse counties in the country.
The most diverse county in the country.
6 to 7%.
Yeah, yeah.
Not each,
No.
total.
And if you don't do the study, I just don't have them off the top of my head. But then I was so angry with the way my colleagues treated me back then. I was the only Democrat, only person of color on Commissioner's Court. I think I was just out there ticked off and had a lot of free time, a lot of bright ideas, but didn't have the votes. So I decided I'd go after my transit authority, my port authority, and when you started shaking the tree, now our port authority has done a disparity study. They hadn't done one.
Right.
That numbers were a little worse than the county's numbers. African-American numbers tend to be the worst. Metro had a consent decree, but it expired. At one point, they got fired. Maybe back when Lee Brown was in or Kathy Whitmire, they'd been doing such a good job on helping minority and women-owned businesses at the Transit Authority in Houston. They were challenged in federal court. Same guy that's handling this case that's before the Supreme Court now, Edward Bloom, was challenging that case in Houston. He's from Houston, about to strike down a bunch of stuff on the federal level again. But we went after Harris Health. I'm glad to see my folks from Harris Health here. That's who I was talking to. They did a disparity study. That number came back 0 for African Americans. They are
zero?
Not 0.002, 0. So I'm saying, you know, that's where most people of color get their health care. You would assume an African American could get a contract mowing the grass. That's what my daddy used to do, cleaning the sheets. It was ridiculous.
Now, the reason, and we talk about this on the show all the time, and the reason as you walk through that, and we're going to be talking about this with panelists later, is getting the public to understand we're talking billions of dollars, taxpayer dollars. So black folks are funding a system and getting absolutely nothing or a small amount in return. And what I keep trying to tell our folks, those are existing dollars. That's not, let's figure out how much to give folks in the check. No, that's literally money right there. And I'm saying, go access the money that's already there.
You remember what I started off saying? We celebrate Juneteenth. Lincoln signed the Emancipation Proclamation, I think, in September. It was to go in effect in January, New Year's Day. The rest of the country knew. Slave owners here knew. And the slaves knew. It wasn't the grapevine, it was the cotton vine. I can assure you they knew that they should have been freed. And a whole lot of people, you know, I love that quote that they won't give Sister Harriet Tubman credit for. You know, there's that quote that was attributed to her saying that she could have freed another 100 or so if only they had known they were slaves. But by and large, that's still a challenge here. None of our school districts, county, not a single one. One of us happens to be black, you're looking at him. 3 Hispanics. These, 1 R, changed the face of county government, which is why they like to get us out of here, by the way.
So you're saying that now having 4 Democrats, 1 Republican, all this stuff is changing. That's for all the folks who say voting don't matter.
Voting matters, but you also got to have Democrats with some guts.
Yes, absolutely.
You know, I always like pointing this out around Juneteenth. You know what I mean? Because it took that long for the word to get here for us to preach. You know, just remember, you got to have folks with some guts willing to stand up. It's
right.
ridiculous that went so long and nobody asked about the study. And I want to go back to this community college, by the way. We have Robert E. Lee Community College. They call it Lee, but it's Robert E. We got San Jacinto Community College. We have Houston Community College and Lone Star Community College. Only one has agreed to do a disparity study. And might I add, the county commission that I'm on, we put up $2 million to see where are the other 3. So
which means that we've got work to
do.
Go to those other 3.
The school districts, Houston Independent School District, it breaks my heart that they were taken over by the state. The interim reached out to me and said, look, you know, we want to be able to talk to you. Well, sure, I talk. Talk is what I do. I'm from Sunnyside. We talk. Hey, I'm one of the talk back brothers. I'm going to do some talking now. I said, look, out of all things you do, I'm not an expert on education. I think I know as much as you all know, but I do think it's deplorable that Houston Independent School District should not collect the numbers. The school board and the superintendent agreed to do it. I'm told they decided not to partake because the takeover was imminent. So I've challenged politely the new leadership. The least you ought to do. That's the easy, sure.
So HISD is not collected.
They don't collect it, and you
So
got to do
y'all
this
hearing
study.
the homework we got.
Yeah, you got to do this study.
Right.
Go collect the data, and don't come up with some Mickey Mouse stuff. Hire a legitimate firm to go do a disparity study.
Right.
It's an audience. Jody and I were in business together. Remember, I used to have a little investment firm.
But go ahead.
Here's what a lot of the firms in here do. Everybody wants to be the chairwoman, Mr. President, the CEO. You know, we got to argue about the name. When Jody, Richard Ramirez, and I, we arguing, well, what are we going to name the firm? Well, it's real simple. It ought to be RJR Securities, Rodney, Jody, and Richard. Then Jody going to go tell Sonny, oh, no. This needs to be Jody, Rodney, and Richard Ramirez. Then Richard Ramirez going to argue, tell this, well, no, this is going to be Richard, Jody, and Rodney. I said, no, here's what we're going to do. RJR works. I'm going to go tell my spouse is Rodney, Jody, and Richard. Richard, you going to tell your spouse is Richard, Jody, and Rodney. Jody, you going to tell Sonny, your wife, is Ron, Jody, Run. I was thinking about Jesse and anymore. Run, Jody, Run. But here's the point. We spent all that time arguing about the name. Who get the credit before we get the money? And then R.J. Nabisco blocked us.
All that arguing.
And R.J. Nabisco said, no, you can't do that. This is when you had to go to the yellow pages to get a name. They didn't have the internet. Jody was at 1985, 86, whenever we started. I'm in Atlanta, and I saw that Apex Museum. You know, you go through the yellow pages. That's why so many firms, AAA, 4A, 2A, AB this, you know, trucking company, Apex Securities. And it was clear we did it. Jody left to get a good job at First Boston. Had it not been for that black and brown owned firm, he wouldn't have gotten that job at First Boston. Richard eventually stayed because I was in politics. Then I sold it eventually. But look, some of these folks got to merge. We were hustling the deal once, Jody, in Jacksonville, Florida, trying to do a bond deal. And we knew our competitors had more people for the presentation. I see one of them said he had about 5 people. We had done a listening to people's conversation. So I said, how are we going to walk in here in this Richard, Jody, and Rodney? And other folks have 5 people. I go buy some suits, get some students at Florida A&M, dress them up. You know, back then, you could say your business, you need to merge. Some of these the reason the biggest black construction firm used to be Thacker out of Atlanta. Thacker Construction from Maynard Jackson era at the airport. Merge these firms.
Yes.
You got to figure out how you. Most people who make money, you know what they do with it, Roland? Spend it.
Yep.
You got to invest money back in your company, and you got to figure out how you just can't go scale it up overnight.
Right.
So my point is, in Harris County, that was your question. The county, the port, the transit authority, at least one community college is coming online. Harris Health, I might have mentioned. Missouri City has followed us. Fort Bend County, all setting up programs. And then don't get into this stuff about it's only for people from here. Sometimes when I was in business, they give us enough, thick of us, kind of working our politics, showing up, we black, we brown. They give us bonds at Denver Airport. Damn, they put us out of business. So it's a two-way street. Don't just show up with a pickup truck and a shovel and think, with the politics, we're going to get you a contract, and they're going to take these French cuffs off of me and put on handcuffs because you can't perform.
Right.
So I just want to mention it's a long way to go. It's a tremendous opportunity. The Biden administration, I want to give them credit. To the extent they can under the law, this case that's coming down, Harvard and University of North Carolina, that case could go beyond impacting affirmative action in higher education. I was with John in D.C. Talking a couple of days earlier this week. If there's language in there that impacts minority business opportunities, then we could all end up having to go to Webb, California. Then you go do other things. You do outreach. But here in Harris County, it's a golden opportunity. I want to encourage your listeners, open up a shop. Richard and Jody and I had to do business in other cities because I had conflicts as a council member. Couldn't do business with the city. Had conflicts with the state. I had to go to other cities. And I want to tell people here, if somebody comes into Houston from Detroit, we did business in Detroit. We did business in Chicago. It's okay. We had to open offices up.
It's also called joint ventures.
Yes.
Yes, sir.
You know, but figure out on your side, make sure you're prepared. Don't just, look, I think by and large, most African-American politicians, in my judgment, are the ones who jump on the table and go crazy. You know, we fight the hardest, but generally when the programs are set up, we are the ones who have suffered the most, fought the hardest to make changes, yet have benefited the least.
Right.
And I get that. You know, I hope that's more than our mission in life. But I want to encourage the entrepreneurs who are listening to this, you know, make sure you look at mergers. The last point, I remember being in high school, San Jacinto, 1969, my 10th grade year. They had me take a little standardized test. They said, Rodney, the test shows you be good at bricklaying. Here my dad, a yard man, mom, I'm a nurse. Hot son, that ain't for me. I'm getting in the house, telling jokes, get a little, oh no, I'm gonna go to college. I said, no, maybe the test shows I'd be good at owning a brick company.
There you go.
And, you know, I was angry because they wanted to push me into a trade. I look back at my life now with the ambition, the drive that I had to get from where I was to where I am. If I had learned how to lay bricks, I'd own the damn brick company.
There you go.
You know, so I want to say to folks, it's not all about going to college. I just got air conditioning work done, $9,000. That cost more money than it cost me when I got divorced the first time.
The first time. Commissioner, it's good to see you. I appreciate it. Thank you so very much. We're going to bring up, put your hands together, Commissioner Rodney Ellis. It's a great way to start panelists up. Our first panelist, y'all come on up here. We got Reginald Martin, Lamont Events. We got Messiah Giles, Houston Defender, Ashley Ray, come on up. Y'all take a seat. Y'all sit wherever y'all want to sit. Ain't no assigned seating. Ain't no assigned seating. I want to get the name right. So, pronounce the name of your company again. Okay, baby, it's the microphone. Come on now, you got it. Come on.
I thought I was mic'd up.
You used to do media.
I thought I was mic'd up. Excuse me, but Mommy Water Organics.
All right, so the reason I constructed the panel this way, so first of all, Ashley just started her company. We have now two folks who took over companies. One that was family, and then one that wasn't family, but then continuing it. And the reason I wanted to do it that way is because one of the biggest mistakes, I think, and Commissioner Ellis talked about this here, a lot of folk want to start something, they want to buy something. They don't want to merge. They don't want to do any of that. And so there are multiple ways to actually begin a business. When I started my show, I literally went to every major black-owned media company. Bring something to you. You have something I already have. Nobody would partner. None of them. Urban One, Black Enterprise, Essence, Blavity. Yeah, I ain't got no problem naming them. I met with all of them. So I was like, fine, I'm going to go ahead and do it. But I made the attempt first to actually do this. And so I want to start this off. Sonny, I want to start with you. How did you acquire the Houston Defender, and why?
You said how?
How?
The decision that I made was to look at what the marketplace looked like. I wanted to buy a radio station originally, Roland. It was not a newspaper. I went and, all the advice says establish relationships with 3 people, a lawyer, a banker, and a CPA. So I did those 3. When it came time for the offer to actually buy the Defender, I went to the banker and I said, okay, I got this great opportunity. He says, Sonny, come into my office. I knew that was a clue, right? So he says, you have 3 strikes against you. I said, okay, tell me what the strikes are. He says, 1, you're black, 2, you're female, and 3, you're not married. I was 27 years old at the time. I said, okay, the only thing, I can't do anything about being black. I can't do anything about being female. What if I marry a rich man? He said, no way. If you really want to do this, you're going to have to take a calculated risk. And so he said, go put it down in black and white, spell out what the pros and cons are, decide if you can do that. And so with that, I put together creative financing, Roland. And what I mean by that, I thought about Sears and doing payments to Mr. Richardson. He said, oh, no, baby, I can't do that. I said, okay. So when we met, I asked him how he came up with the amount of money that he wanted me to pay. And he said, well, it's my car loan, it's my house payment, it's a lien I have. He went down this whole list, right? So I said, and he told me how much cash. Well, I had borrowed that much cash from relatives, friends, and everybody I knew. So I said, okay, Mr. Richardson, what if I pay you the cash and assume all your indebtedness? He said, you can't do that legally. I said, if I can, will you sign? He said, yeah, if you can find a lawyer that'll put it together, go for it. I found a lawyer, we put it together, and in 1981 in October, at the age of 27, I bought the Defender. What I'm saying to you is, if you come up with creative ways, you can figure it out. There are 3 ways you're going to really learn. 1 is you read the books, you go to the webinars, you look at YouTube. 2 is you go talk to smart people. Wisdom warriors, what I call them, but also the people that you want to create relationships with that you can leverage for your
Who are
business.
not necessarily in the same space that you're in.
Exactly. In fact, what I did was I made a list of 25 people in my industry and 20 people who are in Houston. You know those old names. They were old money. And as a result of that, but I also had Dick Johnson, who was the publisher of the Chronicle, and I also had John Johnson, who was the publisher of Ebony. And folks said, you're not going to Chicago, girl. I said, if I can get in the door. It took me 3 years, but I got in the door, and he gave me the best advice I ever had, and that was, don't buy a printing press. You're not in the printing business. You're in the publishing business. So as a result, what I'm saying to you is do the reading and the webinars and the YouTubes. Establish the relationships, because that's 3 is you're going to fail. Dig deep, so that the next time that comes up, you don't make the same mistake. I think those are my key points for relationships, though, are the fundamental part. And so with that, I will say that, make that list of 50 people, 25 folks in your industry, 25 folks in the community that can impact your business. Go meet them, talk to them, ask them for their wisdom and their wise advice, and then go do your thing. Remember to do you, though, because I think part of the problem is folks, family and friends say, oh, you need to do this and oh, you need to do that. But you need to do you, baby, because you know who you are and you know what you want to do and how you want to do it. And when the mistake comes, only person you have to blame is you.
All right. Appreciate it. Yep. Give it up. Give it up. Next up, Reginald Martin Jr. I call him Reggie. We're brothers. So I already know his story.
You see, they look alike.
Well, you know, a little bit. That's some people say. And so you did not go to you did not go to college to run a catering company, but ended up that way. Right. So tell folk again how that happened.
So my mom and dad was like, they didn't go to college. We were first generation college students, me and my brother and my sister. We're all Aggies, and I have two other sisters. But college was college, or, you know, there was no other option. So I ended up majoring in agriculture because that was the closest I was going to get to food. So I got a degree in agriculture out of A&M. Always wanted to be a chef. My grandmother started Lamont Catering.
You a business major.
Yeah, I was a business major. And
but
then
Alvin Lark said.
Yes, I was a business major at the time. I was one probably 4,000 students in that program, and then Dr. Alvin Lark, who ended up being one of my mentors, an alpha there, was like, look, you want to be in business? Why don't you come over to the agribusiness side? So there's another pathway to get to where you want to get to, but with more hands-on relationships with both your mentors, with your professors. So I switched majors from business to agribusiness. My first job out of A&M was with DuPont Chemicals. So I got a chance to go work for this Fortune 500 company.
Hold on, before you go there, I want to go back again.
Yes.
Something Lark said. A lot of black folks who were there were like, I am not majoring in no damn agriculture. But he said, it's a whole lot of money and few of us.
That's true. And so to that point, obviously, it was probably my first step as, one, we were 700 black students out of about 36,000, right, back in 1986, 87. Now, if that's 700 plus out of 36,000, imagine how many blacks was in the agriculture department. I was probably like 5 out of about 1,000. When I got my first job in DuPont agriculture business, there were only 30 black sales reps in the entire country. And DuPont at that time was probably one of the top 3. So you have DuPont, BASF, Dowie Landco. Those are some of the major, what we call agribusiness companies. And so I was always in this space of being one of the few African Americans in a very white-dominated type business, right? Learning a lot, but not having a lot of support around me. So it was both good and both bad. You really had to figure a lot of things on your own. I remember when I flew up to Wilmington, Delaware, interviewed, they gave me an offer. I was actually scared to call my dad because I knew the offer they gave me as a 22-year-old was more than my dad was making at the time. And my dad was a union guy. He worked in the railroad. And as far as I was concerned, he had really a good job. You know, it's blue collar. Commissioner Ellis was talking about there's other pathways to supporting your family and having great jobs. And I thought he had a good job. And then I realized when they gave me my offer, I was like, that's more than what my dad and my mom makes. And it was a weird dynamic because my parents are always supportive.
My first offer was not what he was making. My first offer was half of what they were paying his ass. What was the first offer?
So the first offer was I think about $32,000 plus company car, plus expense account, all that stuff. So
Mine was first before I take the job. They gave me the $22,000, but yes.
So I had this love for food. I lived my vision of food through my first 6 years working for DuPont. Came back home, and I really always wanted to relaunch our family business, Lamont Catering. It was a mom and pop business, but I had this passion for food. I started my first champagne bottle I opened. I was 9 years old. We did when Commissioner Ellis was talking about Mickey Leland. So I remember we did banquets with Mickey Leland was a key speaker. We catered. My mom, my mother. So my grandmother was really good friends with Sophronia Thompson. They traveled everywhere.
They were running buddies.
They were running buddies. So we used Lamont Catering usually catered a lot of the black political speaking events at various community centers, from Barrett Station to Houston.
All over. And just so y'all know, we had a meeting in D.C. with Congressman Mickey Leland. I was at Texas A&M, and there was 2 other black guys with us, and I was like, listen, we go into the meeting, y'all shut the hell up. I got this. One, he went to Wheatley. I went to Yates. Don't be talking about, yeah. And so I walk in, and so we start trash talking Yates and Wheatley. And then I said, Imelda Lamont was my grandmother. Oh, man, I love her food. He started going on. That's why I said, I just need y'all to shut up. We got this. I said, that's going to set the meeting up. So, yeah, but the whole point is utilizing the family relationships, no matter what Sonny was talking about, relationships, how it can impact.
And those are relationships in the black community, right? And so fast forward, my wife and I get married, and she marries into this business. She's a Rice graduate, so her and I run the company now, Lamont Kitchen.
She the black sheep family. She a Rice graduate.
We love you, Miranda.
We got 5 Texas A&M graduates in the family. But go ahead.
So 2 years into our marriage, we get this opportunity, and this really defined us because this was 20 plus years ago. Not who we are today, but 20 plus years ago, Rice University comes to us and they say, there's this place, this venue called the Baker Institute. So Secretary of State James Baker, his Public Policy Institute is at Rice University. And the 2 trustees who are on this planning event, says, we want to do something different. Now, keep in mind in Houston at that time, not today, I want you to think 20 years ago, catering was all out of people's homes. Catering is not what you see now. There were 2 firms in Houston that were real caterers, Jackson Hicks and Benny Farrells. So Benny Farrells was the African-American firm. It was Jackson Hicks that did everything else, right? That's the only 2 you would ever use to do a seated dinner for 900 plus people with the Vice President of the United States, Dick Cheney, as a keynote speaker. So they asked us to come in, do a tasting, and I'm like, okay, right, whatever, we're going to do this tasting. Okay, we do a tasting.
So just like the Osteens did, went to do the tasting for them.
Yeah, so we did the same thing. The Osteen family, they asked us to come in, do a tasting because they needed a new caterer to do all their food. This is all happening all within a 2 to 3 year period, and we're like, okay, whatever, sure, all right. So, and I had gone to culinary school, obviously graduated from A&M. My wife graduated from Rice. She had a background working in events at the Museum of Fine Arts and the Orange Show, which again, places that African Americans don't normally work in, but we're getting great experience. And there's this firm called Richard Flowers and Associates. So Richard Flowers and Associates is at that time, the event planner in Houston. All the decor, all the linen, and more importantly, all the florals. Well, my grandmother was a florist, so we identified. We talked about how we started, and he wanted to partner. So this event at Rice is like, hey, we're going to be the event production company. We want you to be the caterer. And we're like, okay. So we have a second tasting. Well, my wife is in the hospital because she had got bitten by some mosquito and she had bacterial meningitis, and I have to go do this by myself. Now, I'm the chef. I don't do the front stuff. That's her. So I do this second tasting, and we're like, okay, I did it, babe. I think it went well. They asked questions, but I'm still not thinking. We appreciate you asking us to come to the table, trying us out. And so about another month later, it was like, we're going to use you guys. We're like, really? Are you serious? This is a plated dinner for 950 people, multi-courses. It's a 4-day event. They raised at that event alone $3.5 million. And I was talking about this guy, Richard Flowers. During this whole process, he gets bought out by Tillman Fertitta. So now I'm partnering with not just Richard Flowers, I'm partnering with Tillman Fertitta 20 years ago. At this event, we had 30 chefs working in the back. I'm the executive chef. We had 200 plus wait staff. My wife was doing the pre-reception with Vice President Cheney. 41 was there, Bush was there. We had all the lead journalists around the world was there covering this event. And I'm like, still can't believe we're doing this. And it was a magnificent opportunity. In fact, when they finally called and says, okay, we're ready to move forward, they're like, so we're going to put a deposit down. And it was like $75,000. And they wanted to put on a credit card. And my wife and I looked at each other like, can you really put $75,000 on a credit card? We were like, we had never actually processed that before. This was 20 years ago. And so, needless to say, it was flawless, right? So anyone who mattered in the space of giving, donating, museums, you name it, they were at this event and all the festivities for the weekend. Got great write-ups in the newspaper, and when it was all over, it was like this. Wow, that was a great experience. I don't know if I ever want to do that again, because you live through it, and then you quickly realize this. And so back to what Commissioner Ellis was saying, you can't do this by yourself. We realized that we spent $200,000 on needing new vans and equipment just to execute this event, but you have to do that kind of event every week or every month to sustain, right? So we invested all this money to make it happen. We made money, invested in, we realized about 3 months later, we were still doing events. You're not going to do that kind of a gala every week, but we're like, man, if you're going to operate in this space, you have to have a lot of capital. You have to have a lot of staff. You have to continue to go look for new opportunities, because most of your clients, nope, we're not using those linen. I mean, they literally will not use re-linen. They won't reuse floor, like brand new stuff. It's only maybe about, what's the black book in Houston? It was like this social book they used to have. It was called
Green Book?
No, not the Green. It was a black social book. It's a book. It's a social book where every major nonprofit that does galas is in this event. Like, you know who these people are. Nobody ever wants to see the same linen, the same floors, the same centerpiece of the event. It all has to be bespoke.
I mean, those who's who,
Those who's, it's like a who's book of
Yeah.
societies of nonprofits.
Gotcha.
And so you realize every time you buy something, you have to find someone else willing to pay to use that, because the clients who really have the big money don't want to see that. It's like a new season every week or every month. And we realize, man, this is a very expensive sort of space to operate in. So going through that after a couple of years, we recognize that, okay, we're really good at doing what we call museum quality food, right? We can do museum quality events, but do it our way, be authentic to who we are. So we settle into that 200 to 300 person type event, where we own on all the china, all the equipment. We can sufficiently give you staff, execute it at a Le Mans standard. And then, so we move from the gala type events to doing more museum, nonprofit fundraising events. And that's sort of where we found our organization. Our sweet spot is 200 to 300 events. Yes, when the Super Bowl comes, we can do an event for 4,000 people. You want bars, that's easy. But really, full service, gourmet events, that's sort of where we found our space. The other area we recognize is that despite being an African-American owned company, we don't have a lot of African-American clients. We don't. And so we strike a really fine balance, because it's not that we don't want to work with our community. It's a certain cost to do what we do at a certain level, and we only do it one way, right? So like when my brother came yesterday and said, what's up with the food? And we ain't really talk about it that much, because if y'all know Roland, people think I talk to him all the time. I don't, right? Roland is still a text away from me. If I need to talk to him, he know what the 911 code is. Like, okay, I need to talk to you. But people think that I can just get him on my phone, and it really doesn't work that way. Sometimes I got to call his assistant just like everybody else. If I got to book him so he can town, Brenda. And so yesterday at 5:30. You see, Sonny knows.
First of all, I know what I do.
That's rolling.
I know what I do. And it was like, you got the food? Got it. All right.
So we made it happen with very little time. And
What you want to eat?
So
that's what you do.
So the next phase that we realized is that we were very good at mobilizing with very short time. So where we've become experts in is in government contracting. So we are very successful at local, state, and federal contracting. When Harvey hit, we were asked to activate for the city of Houston, and we partnered with a nonprofit. We got the old Star of Hope mission open in about maybe 2 weeks. It felt like 5 days, because the city council said, we have to move all these people out of the Georgia Brown to the old Star of Hope. 300 homeless, like the worst of the worst in terms of they didn't have an ability to go rent apartments because they didn't have credit. So they didn't have a place to place them, but they needed to get them out of the Georgia Brown. And they said, Lamont, will you partner with this company? We need 3 meals a day, 300 residents. It starts in 2 days. Okay, gotcha.
Isn't that why it's so important, those contracts that Rodney Ellis
Yes.
was talking about? That would not have happened if there had been some kind of commitment to MWBE.
Exactly. So that's an example. So when you think about how we grow our businesses, where are African Americans going to be able to grow their businesses? That's where all the law bunches of money is. That it is in government contracts. It's partnering with nonprofits. But I am going to say this, and this I was the hallelujah chorus over here. we cannot agree that, hey, can we share this bigger pie together?
Right.
We're going to keep getting these little small crumbs and these little small slices. I can't tell you how many firms, we own our kitchen. We have all the trucks and a food truck and a liquor license. I can't tell you over the last 20 years how many black firms we've tried to say, come to the table. We'll show you how to do this. We'll show you how we can grow this together and partner in, like Rodney said.
But it's like how I started when I said I literally went to all of these folks, and it was kind of like, I'm doing what none of y'all are doing, and none wanted to partner, and it was just the absolute dumbest thing. And when you're talking about scale, I use the example of John H. Johnson. You're not going to, in this day, you're not going to launch an Ebony, first of all, a Negro Digest, an Ebony and Jet, and you're going to run it for 65 years, and you're going to grow.
That dog won't hunt anymore.
It's not going to happen. And guess what happened? John H. Johnson said no to radio. Bob Johnson went to John H. Johnson, wasn't interested. And here's the reality. When John H. Johnson died, the company was not positioned for the future. And yes, it still exists, but it is nothing like what it was. It's gone through now numerous owners because they were not preparing for the next thing. And that's the thing.
So I'm going to finish this one, and I know it's because to your point. So after 20 years, my wife and I were like, how do we partner? So 4 years ago, Hobby Airport came up. Many of you know Hobby, and there's been a lot of legal battles in the news. Yes. Oh, no, Papas, not for Tita.
Papas.
We were on 3 different teams at Hobby. Started 4 years ago because we knew maybe catering in the future, but being professionals in this business, food service and contracts is what we do. So we were fortunate enough in January, we were awarded one of those contracts that he mentioned. And so we'll have a restaurant at Hobby Airport. It's a branded restaurant. We're going to run a Jersey Mike's at Hobby. So here's the lesson. And I tell you this is my one last lesson in the pitch, is that they asked us, one company asked us 3 times to put a Le Mans kitchen. And I said, no, I'm not putting a Le Mans kitchen. You go get me a national brand. We're only going to run, my wife and I, but we only want a national brand. Why? I only need one national brand that I can replicate that brand at other airports. I can put them on the street. It's hard taking your own brand trying to replicate. It's almost impossible. Like, there may not be a Le Mans kitchen 20 years from now, but there's going to be a Le Mans corporation that has interest in other businesses. So we have a Jersey Mike's coming our way.
It's like lightning in a bottle. After Mayor Turner, who was actually on his way, we're going to have a conversation with the Turkey Leg Hut.
Yes.
And that's going to be, the purpose of that conversation is a case study. How to walk through, how do they do what they do? But what they have done is absolutely rare.
It is.
And a lot of people say, I want a restaurant. You don't understand how that whole concept works. It's just rare. It's just rare.
It is rare.
It's
It really is.
Right. I want to actually, because we met, you were doing media stuff in New York.
Yes,
You were working with 50 Cent in G Unit.
This is 50. I have a media background since I was 13 years old, but in New York City, I was on-camera personality since I was 18 years old.
And that's how we met. We were talking. You moved down to Houston. You were still trying to do media and stuff along those lines. Then last time I was here, you said, "Hey, I'm starting this organic company, organic items," and I was like, "Girl, what you doing?"
He was.
So I want you to talk about what was that pivot when you said, I did that for a while, but now I need to go here. I want to do this here. What happened?
You know what's so funny is I think that there wasn't a pivot as a trajectory, because right now I'm sitting here and my goal is to tell you guys about my company, and I don't think I would be able to do it if I wasn't Ashley Ray, who sat and was able to explain or talk about things prior to. But I've been a media personality almost my entire life. Mami Wada Organics was started in my kitchen. In 2016, I put myself on a challenge to learn something new once a month, to focus on something. I learned ASL, but one of the things that I learned was Ayurvedics and medicinal plants. I got Ayurvedic certified on Groupon.
We ain't talking about weed. We ain't talking about those companies.
honestly,
always.
part of how I learned.
Just checking. Okay.
Yes, actually. Part of how I learned how to do extractions was I started with bud first, if I'm being completely honest with you. Because it is the same process for taking the medicine from plants.
Got it.
It's the same exact thing. But after learning that, a couple years later, I was in a space where I just was not healthy. But I just was not in a good space.
Girl, that's a lot.
Right? And nowadays. But so in 2018, I went back to what I learned in 2016, and I said, let's expand upon that. My hair's falling out. How do I get that to grow without using products that are on shelves that have chemicals in them? So I started learning about hair products. I started learning about our Koji skin salt is for skin brightening. But I will tell you, so when I first started, I said, let's start with weight loss. Right? So my first product is the Goddess Elixir. At the time, my blood pressure was very high. My doctor had put me on blood pressure medicine. I started going through the books. I said, what herbs if you take them medicinally daily in low doses, would help with blood pressure? Because blood pressure medicine is bad for your liver. Your liver, without it being processed properly, messes with your digestion. All these things just knock years off your life. So the goal was to cleanse my liver, and vein, it was to lose weight for on camera. So when I started looking at the right plants and fenugreek and learning about what turmeric does when you do, and also dosing. I'm currently in class for medicinal medicine at Cornell, and hopefully by the time we launch 8/4, I will be done with that class. But I came up with a tea mix first, and that product, I took it for 21 days at first. I started, in that first time, I lost 17 pounds in the first 21 days of using it.
Sign me up.
Yeah, right? But that's not the only thing that happened. I had gone to the doctor previously, before that, and found out that my blood pressure was going high. They put me on a blood pressure medicine, and I no longer take that medicine because of the Goddess Elixir. So once the weight started to fall off, within 5 months, I lost 60 pounds. I also I had made a 180 lifestyle change as well, which is what we teach you. What MWO, I teach people what I learned, basically. So once that started happening, the weight started coming off so fast, I started having things like discoloration, skin tightening, and all this kind of stuff. Things was hanging in places that it wasn't supposed to be hanging. So I said, how do we fix that with the cosmetics? Is the preservatives, and the things that they use for you to be able to keep it in your cabinet. So I said, how do we make this without adding that? All of our products, including our Koji skin salt, which is an additive that you add to our rue and saffron oil, which our rue and saffron oil. You combine the two, and there is a that happens on an as-needed basis. So you aren't always putting harsh chemicals on your body, or chemicals at all, when you use our products. And these are spot treatments. I will, if I feel like I'm losing a little bit too much weight, I will make a rest on my products. But I rotate them. They're on an as-needed basis, because I find that a lot of times if we're using something, I got a little something here, I'll put a chemical on my body that you don't know that because you're the consumer, that you're only supposed to use that for 21 days. So you're using it for 60, and your skin, black people, we have a barrier that white people don't. So it's doing something to your skin that it wouldn't do for others. So that's basically the basis of my business. We have 16 products total. We're going to launch with 4 on August 4th of this year. And I can't even believe that Roland, I have no idea. He called me and said on Tuesday, you want to do a panel? I was like, okay. He sent me the flyer last night. I hyperventilated for a little while, but I showed up. I'm here now. I also want to know who is the bad one?
What do you mean?
Of the two of y'all.
My goodness.
Who was the troublemaker?
Oh, you know.
That's easy.
That's
I
not
thought
even
so. I just was.
Trust me, Ashley.
Okay.
Ashley, that wasn't even a question.
That's easy. That's easy. I ain't got no problem with trouble.
I will say, though, I was lured to Houston by a nonprofit and a entrepreneurship coming up on his 10-year anniversary for his small business here, and he's barely 30. He's in his lower 30s. So that just tells you what a business can do here in Texas, and he's thriving. He's on his third business, actually. Serial entrepreneur. So I got to see just the network and the community of people here, and black business owners here. how they support each other. And I'm learning a lot, and I'm super humbled to be here.
See, the thing is, first I'll give it up for Ashley. So when I was talking about doing something this year, and this is actually a precursor to something that's going to be happening next year, which we'll talk about when the mayor comes here. I wanted to focus. The reason I wanted to be on economics is because when I look at all these other events and I get all these emails and everything, I keep saying, "Where's the money?" And not just where's the money. All of these events that are happening, and a lot of these events, I then go, are black folks benefiting? So a lot of times, what CEOs Thursday in Clearwater, and they say, well, they'll transfer me back, and she said no. And so, and again, if you ask me the keynote, you don't know what the hell I'm going to say. And I literally said, I don't know how y'all could be meeting here, but black CDFI CEOs. I said, and y'all didn't attempt to find a black limo company. And it's a consciousness, if you will, when you begin to say who are actually benefiting. And one of the things that, again, when I look at Juneteenth, what I keep saying on the show is, now that it's a federal holiday, this is truly our thing. Black folk, this is our thing. South Carolina talk, no, this is a unity event. No, we ain't having, this ain't no unity conversation. Because if we get away from what Juneteenth is, but my deal is, you cannot talk about Juneteenth and freedom if you ain't talking about the money. You can't. And I think that's a huge mistake. And I just think that for a lot of our folks, we also, and I want you to speak to this, which all of you actually spoken to, this notion of how we also keep playing small. Yeah. You've dealt with this with other black newspapers. Talk about all these years dealing with other black papers. You were doing stuff, running TV commercials and radio commercials and billboards, and they look at you, what you do? Was playing small today, them playing small for so many years. Now that the industry has shifted, now they really are small. And so talk about that pivot moment where the industry was changing, where you said, how I used to play, I can't play like this in the future in order to still survive.
The bottom line is, audiences are, where they get their information is different than it was 20, 40 years ago when I first got into the business. By the way, the Defender's celebrating 92 years, and you don't just last 92 years for just shucking and jiving, okay? So with that, though, I think the elephant in the room, Roland, is what I call the trifecta. Black people doing business with black people. Talk about public and private sector, but black folks, you got to do business with black people, because those are the people who are employing black people. Two is the public and private sector. You heard Commissioner Ellis talk about the public sector and the fact that Harris Health is at 0%. Port of Houston is at 5%. Metro is at 3%. And I may have the percentages wrong, but when you add all of them up, it's less than 6%. So my point being is that we as a community, you flip to the private sector. In the Wall Street Journal yesterday, you know, Byron Lewis was on his church, and they were writing an editorial about the big...
About Byron Allen. Right.
Byron Lewis for some reason.
I got you.
Byron Allen, there was an editorial in the Wall Street Journal about the Big Mac attack, in which he is personally attacking McDonald's for $10 million lawsuit. And in some cases, it's really self-serving, but when you flip the switch, what you do speaks louder than what you say. And I think corporate America has to step up and look at, if black folks are doing a certain percentage of volume of your profit margin or your bottom line, you should be doing that percentage of business with elephant in the room. The other flip side of that is our tax dollars. You pay taxes. What's happening to your tax dollars? They're not even spending money with your people.
There you
so
go.
The question becomes, how do we as a community, and I don't have the answer, but God knows, if before I close my eyes, somebody can come up with an answer, I'll be right there with them. How do we as a community leverage what we have, our tax dollars, our consumer dollars, in a way that we get the recognition from these corporate, both public and private sector entities, to say we deserve our fair share of those dollars?
Well, again, I think one of the things what you talked about there, and we literally just agreed to this. For the last 2 years, we have been in negotiation, in discussion, numerous with McDonald's. Last week, we agreed to a 3-year, 7 deal. There you go.
They're doing it.
And we are in conversations with Procter & Gamble. There are other companies as well. And the thing that what you laid out is literally the combination that this is how we can access people. We go on and on. And then I say, when I'm seeing your ads on, it's a perfect example. We did a deal with Novo Nordisk, an obesity special in December. Hit them and I said,
who has more diabetes than us?
precisely.
Yeah.
So one of the brother with them hit me back, and they were like, well, when I saw the line, I knew it came from an agency. It's about scale and reaching customers. I was like, well, first of all, ain't nobody got more diabetes than black people.
Right.
And so then the comment was, well, you can. He certainly can reach out to our agency. I'm just saying that really wasn't a quite answer I wanted to receive, but then I said, well, I know exactly who their agency is, and we're going to have that conversation. We have a generation of people today who literally are afraid to challenge, who literally are afraid to say, look, y'all spending money. Now, we could what they say in Proud Mary, we can have a nice and easy conversation, or we can have a rough conversation.
But we also, Roland, have to be careful of people using other people as though they're doing something in the community.
Right.
And because they'll pick off one or two of us.
Oh, absolutely.
And say, hey, y'all, look what we're doing in the black
And we
community.
gotta be willing to also call out those one or two when they're fronting. And so, and I just think that where we are right now, post George Floyd.
Yes.
Reggie, you and I were having a conversation last night.
I was going to comment about that.
There were corporations pledged anywhere from 30 to 300 billion, and I warn folk, don't let that become a press release. At a meeting with General Motors, their then CMO Deborah Wall, I said, let me explain something to y'all. I ain't praising y'all for a press release. I'm gonna praise you for direct deposits.
So to Roland's point, and I really can't stress, you really have to take the words Commissioner Ellis said earlier, is that we can do all this work. We can make all this sacrifice. We can create all this opportunity. Strategic about our partnerships, understanding how we need to be prepared to do those contracts. And so I was fortunate enough to be in some conversations with Starbucks about 6 months ago. They have one of these commitments to spend, they want to get to $1.5 billion annually with people of color. They spend about half of that right now. And in my initial conversations, I met the first couple of times and I said, well, you all don't franchise Starbucks. So, I don't know too many black companies that grow coffee, like the beans. We don't asking me to come back because this was a supplier opportunity to basically run one of their big opportunity. And I kept saying, I don't think we're ready to scale. And they kept saying, no, we want you to keep, they wanted me to bid this process. And I'm glad I did because I learned. It forced me to go find other partners because then I learned that they're not going to $8.5 billion.
Nope.
There's no way